What happens when a man, blinded by ambition, kicks his pregnant wife out into the cold, believing she is nothing? Peter Adler thought he was trading up, securing his future by discarding his poor wife, Eleanor. He told her she was worthless. He told her she'd be nothing without him. He was wrong. Because 5 years later, at the biggest party of his life, a knock comes on the door. He's about to be introduced to the new owner of his mansion, and he already knows her name. This isn't a story about revenge, it's a story about a reckoning. The rain was cold, a merciless, driving chill that defined that November in Chicago, but it was nothing compared to the ice in Peter Adler's voice. You're an embarrassment, Eleanor. A walking, talking liability. Eleanor, 5 months pregnant, couldn't stop her hands from shaking. She wasn't shaking from the cold, not yet. She was shaking from the absolute, sterile hatred radiating from the man she had loved since he was a scrappy business school intern, and she was the barista who always remembered his complicated order. "Peter, please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "It's the gala. I just spilled some wine. It was an accident." An accident? The voice didn't come from Peter. It was his mother, Genevieve Adler, a woman carved from expensive marble and disdain. She glided into the foyer of their sprawling Lincoln Park mansion, her silver dress glittering. "You tripped over your own feet and dumped a tray of Cabernet on Robert Sterling. The Robert Sterling, the man whose company is about to merge with our son's." "I'm pregnant, Genevieve. My balance is off." "That," Genevieve said, her voice dropping to a venomous hiss, "is the core of the problem, isn't it?" Peter wouldn't look at her. He was busy staring at his reflection in the hall mirror, adjusting the cuffs of his $5,000 Tom Ford tuxedo. He was the picture of new money success, the VP of a rapidly expanding private equity firm, and Eleanor, with her department store maternity dress, which she'd bought on sale, and her simple, kind face, was a stain on that picture. She came from nothing, a trailer park in Indiana. Her parents were gone, and her only inheritance was a mountain of medical debt and a box of old photographs. Peter had once called her his grounding force. Now, she was just gravity pulling him down. "Peter," she pleaded, turning to him. "It's just a dress." He laughed it off. "He laughed, Eleanor," Peter finally snapped, turning on her. His blue eyes, which she used to think were as warm as the Mediterranean, were now Arctic. He laughed the way a lion laughs at a wounded gazelle. "I just spent 6 months convincing the Sterlings that I am their equal, that our family is one they should want to be tied to. And you show up looking like that." "Like what?" she asked, tears welling. "Like your poor," Genevieve supplied, stepping forward. "Because you are, dear. You can't polish a... well, you know the expression." "Get your coat," Peter said, his voice flat and dead. "What?" "Peter, no, we can't go. We're the hosts. I'll apologize again." "No, we aren't going anywhere. You are." He walked to the imposing front door and pulled it open. The windy, wet Chicago night howled into the pristine foyer, blowing a spatter of rain onto the polished floor. Eleanor's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about this," he said, pulling a slim envelope from his jacket pocket. "Our lawyer, Silas, drew this up. It's a separation agreement. It's very generous. It gives you $10,000 for your troubles." Eleanor's hand went to her stomach. The baby kicked, a tiny, fluttering reassurance that was suddenly the only real thing in the world. "A separation. Peter, I'm carrying your child." "A problem, as I said," Genevieve purred. "A child complicates the merger. Isabella Sterling, Robert's daughter." She's not the type to tolerate baggage. The name hit Eleanor like a physical blow. Isabella Sterling, the stunning, blonde, ice queen heiress she'd seen Peter laughing with at company events, the woman he'd sworn was just a business contact. You're doing this for her? Eleanor's whisper was barely audible. You're throwing us out. For her? I'm securing my future, Eleanor, Peter said, his face a mask of impatience. This firm, this life, it's not for people like you. You were a phase, a sweet, naive mistake. Now the mistake is over. But my things, where will I go? I had your things packed, Genevieve said, gesturing to a single medium-sized suitcase standing by the stairs. The staff was efficient. As for where you'll go, I hear those shelters are surprisingly clean these days. Or you could go back to, where was it? Gary? Muncie? One of those dreadful little towns. The $10,000 check was inside the envelope, a severance package, for 5 years of her life, for loving him, for supporting him when he was a nobody, for carrying his child. I won't sign this, Eleanor said, a spark of fight igniting through the shock. It doesn't matter if you do or not, Peter said with a shrug. Silas is filing for divorce tomorrow. Grounds of, irreconcilable differences. He'll serve you papers at whatever hovel you land in. Take the check, Eleanor. It's the last cent you'll ever get from me. He tossed the envelope onto the floor. It landed with a soft thud on the wet patch of rain. Now get out, he said, his voice final. Peter, please! She lunged for him, grabbing his arm. Don't do this! Think about the baby. Our baby! His reaction was immediate and violent. He recoiled, shoving her away. Don't touch me! The shove was harder than he intended, or perhaps exactly as hard as he intended. Eleanor, her balance already precarious, stumbled backward. Her heel caught on the edge of the plush Persian rug. She fell, hard, against the foyer's marble-topped console table. The crystal vase on it wobbled and crashed to the floor, shattering into 1,000 pieces alongside her dignity. She cried out, a sharp gasp of pain and fear, clutching her stomach. For a single, frozen moment, Peter looked scared. He looked at her, then at his mother. Genevieve's face didn't flicker. Get up, Eleanor. You're not damaged, and you're ruining the ambience. The Sterlings will be here in 10 minutes. Peter's moment of humanity vanished, replaced by the mask of ambition. He looked down at his wife, on the floor, surrounded by shattered glass and water, clutching their unborn child. He pointed to the door. Security will be here in 60 seconds if you're not on the other side of that door. Don't make this uglier than it already is. Sobbing, shaking, Eleanor used the wall to pull herself to her feet. The pain in her side was sharp, but the pain in her heart was a black hole. She looked at Peter, the man she'd promised to love in sickness and in health. He was just a stranger in a tuxedo. She picked up her single suitcase. She didn't look at the check on the floor. She left it there, on the rain-soaked marble. She walked out of the door, her thin coat offering no protection against the stinging rain. The massive oak door of the mansion shut behind her with a sound of utter, damning finality. A click of a lock. Eleanor Adler was homeless, pregnant, and penniless. She stood on the curb, the rain plastering her hair to her face, and watched as a black limousine pulled up. Robert and Isabella Sterling, laughing and radiant, stepped out. Peter and Genevieve were already at the door, wreathed in smiles, to welcome them in. The next 6 months were a blur of humiliation, hunger, and a terror so profound, Eleanor thought it would swallow her whole. The $10,000 check she had refused to pick up was a ghost. She had less than $20 in her purse. Peter, with cruel efficiency, had already frozen their joint bank account, the account into which she had, for 5 years, deposited her own paychecks from the cafe, money he'd called our little fun fund. She spent 2 nights in a bus station, shivering, clutching her stomach, pretending to wait for a bus that would never come. She ate saltine crackers from a vending machine. On the 3rd day, a kind-faced security guard gently told her she couldn't stay. He pointed her toward a women's shelter in the city's less-than-charitable West Loop. The St. Jude's shelter for women was loud, smelled of bleach and boiled potatoes, and was terrifyingly full. But it was warm. It was safe. Eleanor, swallowing the jagged shards of her pride, gave a false name, Ella Vance, and accepted a cot in a room with 5 other women. Pregnancy made her vulnerable, but it also made her a priority. The shelter's overworked social worker, a woman named Maria, got her a spot in a transitional housing program. It was a single room in a rundown building, but it had a lock on the door and a hot plate. Eleanor's new life was a monotonous schedule of survival. She took the bus to a prenatal clinic, standing in line for hours for a 5-minute checkup. She applied for food stamps. She searched for work, but who was hiring a visibly pregnant woman with no references and no fixed address? She'd listed her old cafe on applications, but she suspected one call to Genevieve's people had blacklisted her. The loneliness was a physical weight. She had no one. Her parents were gone. The few friends she'd had were Peter's friends now, and they'd all watched, silent, as Genevieve Adler had systematically isolated her over the years. One day, shuffling down a street with a bag of day-old bread from a local pantry, she saw a newspaper. On the front of the business section was Peter. He was smiling, his arm around Isabella Sterling. The headline read, "Adler-Sterling Merger, Complete, a New Chicago Power Couple." Eleanor threw up in a trash can. The baby wasn't baggage to be tolerated. It was a complication to the merger. With Eleanor gone, the merger was now a marriage. The engagement was official. That was the day Eleanor's sorrow curdled. It didn't disappear, but it crystallized. It hardened into something else. Resolve. She was no longer just surviving for herself. She was surviving for the tiny, innocent life inside her. The life he had discarded. She found a job. It was under the table, cash at the end of the day. A tiny, struggling Greek diner called the Acropolis was run by an elderly, sharp-witted woman named Elena Petrov. Mrs. Petrov had seen it all and was impressed by nothing. "You're pregnant," Mrs. Petrov observed, not unkindly, when Eleanor asked for a job washing dishes. "I am," Eleanor said, her voice steady. "But I'm not sick. I'm strong, and I won't be late. Not ever." Mrs. Petrov looked at Eleanor's hands, raw from the cold, and the deep, haunted circles under her eyes. She saw the steel beneath the exhaustion. "You eat here. Anything you want," Mrs. Petrov said. $40 a day, in your pocket. You start now." Eleanor washed dishes for 8 hours a day, her feet swelling, her back aching. But she ate. She ate for 2. She saved every single dollar, hiding it in a sock under her thin mattress. Mrs. Petrov would often accidentally pack extra moussaka or a block of feta for Ella to take home. She never asked about a husband. She never asked about Eleanor's past. She just gave her work, and with it, a sliver of dignity. 4 weeks before her due date, the divorce papers finally found her. A smug-looking process server tracked her to the diner. Silas, Peter's lawyer, had been thorough. The papers were delivered during the lunch rush, a deliberate, final humiliation. The grounds weren't irreconcilable differences. They were abandonment and infidelity. Eleanor's blood ran cold as she read the accusations. Peter was claiming she had abandoned him, that she had been unstable and promiscuous. He was even contesting the paternity of the baby, demanding a test, all while petitioning the court to waive his rights and responsibilities. He wasn't just divorcing her, he was erasing her. He was building a legal fortress to ensure she and his child could never, ever lay claim to a single penny of the Adler-Sterling fortune. Mrs. Petrov took one look at Eleanor's ashen face, snatched the papers from her hand, and dragged her into the back office. "This man," Mrs. Petrov said, her Greek accent thickening with rage as she scanned the legal jargon. "He is scarta. He is garbage. You will not sign this." "What can I do?" Eleanor wept. "I have no money, no lawyer. You have a child. His child. That is not nothing," Mrs. Petrov declared. "We will find a lawyer, a legal aid lawyer. You will fight this. But first, you will eat. And then we make a plan." But they never got the chance. That night, Eleanor's water broke. It was a long, terrifying labor. She was alone. The nurses at the public hospital were kind, but overworked. As the sun rose over Lake Michigan, casting a pale grey light into the sterile room, Eleanor gave birth to a daughter. She was tiny, 6 pounds, with a tuft of dark hair and a ferocious cry. Eleanor held her, and the black hole in her heart filled with a white-hot, protective love that burned away everything else. "Lily," she whispered, kissing the baby's head. "Your name is Lily. And I promise you, Lily, they will never hurt us again. I promise you. We will be safe." She was discharged 2 days later. She and Lily went back to the single, cold room. Eleanor looked at the divorce papers on her nightstand, the accusations of her infidelity, the demand for a paternity test. "He wants to play, Lily," Eleanor whispered to her sleeping newborn. "Fine, but he doesn't know the rules. He doesn't know me." She was no longer Eleanor Adler, the discarded wife. She wasn't even Ella Vance, the dishwasher. She was Lily's mother. And she was about to find out just who she really was. Life with a newborn in a one-room apartment was a brutal test of endurance. Eleanor's days were a cycle of feeding, washing diapers in the sink, and walking the floors with a colicky Lily. Mrs. Petrov, a godsend, let her bring Lily to the diner, where the baby slept in a bassinet in the back office, while Eleanor prepped vegetables and balanced the books. Eleanor was smart. She'd been a scholarship student in college, where she'd met Peter, and had a natural affinity for numbers. Mrs. Petrov, impressed, soon had Ella doing payroll and managing inventory. When Lily was 6 months old, a letter arrived. It was forwarded from the shelter, which had forwarded it from her last known address, the Lincoln Park mansion. It had taken months to find her. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and embossed with the name of a prestigious law firm in downtown Chicago, Hayes, Cromwell and Finch. She opened it with trembling hands. It was formal, dense, and confusing. It referred to the estate of Mr. Daniel Vance and requested her presence to discuss an urgent matter of probate. "Daniel Vance," she murmured. That was her father's name. Eleanor's father was a ghost. He had abandoned her and her mother when Eleanor was 3. Her mother, until her dying day, had referred to him as that no-good, wandering dreamer. Eleanor had assumed he was long dead, or had simply vanished into the ether of forgotten, irresponsible men. She called Mrs. Petrov, who insisted on closing the diner for the afternoon, to go with her. "You do not see men like this," she said, tapping the embossed letter. "Alone. They are sharks in better suits. I will be your, how you say? Your babushka." The offices of Hayes, Cromwell and Finch were on the 80th floor of the Willis Tower. The lobby was all marble and hushed, expensive silence. Eleanor, in her best and only clean blouse, felt hopelessly out of place. They were shown into a palatial office overlooking the city. A man rose to greet them. He was not a shark. He was in his late 60s, with kind eyes, a silver-white beard, and a gentle demeanour. "Miss Vance?" he asked, extending a hand to Eleanor. I go by Ella, or Eleanor. My married name is, this is my daughter, Lily. She is beautiful," the man said, smiling at the baby in Eleanor's arms. "I am Julian Hayes. I was your father's lawyer, and, I'd like to think, his friend." "You knew my father?" Eleanor was stunned. "For 25 years. Please, sit." Julian gestured to the leather chairs. Mrs. Petroff sat stiffly, her eyes darting around the room, ready to defend Eleanor from a sudden attack. "Miss Vance, Eleanor, I'm afraid I am the bearer of sad news. Your father, Daniel, passed away 6 weeks ago. A heart attack. It was very sudden." Eleanor didn't know what to feel. She hadn't seen this man in over 20 years. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said, the words feeling hollow. "He was a remarkable man," Julian said, his eyes misting slightly. "Very complicated. He asked me to find you upon his death. He's been trying to find you for years, you know." He was? "Yes. After your mother passed, the trail went cold. He respected her wish to keep you separate. He was..." Julian sighed. "Eleanor, what did your mother tell you about your father?" "That he was a broke musician. That he ran off and left us with nothing." Julian Hayes let out a long, slow breath. He leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "Eleanor, your mother and father, their story was a tragedy, but not in the way you were told. Your father, Daniel Vance, was not a broke musician. He was the eldest son of one of the wealthiest and most reclusive families in New England, the Vances of Hartford." Eleanor's head spun. "What?" "Daniel fell in love with your mother, a beautiful, spirited woman who was, in his family's eyes, unsuitable. When he refused to leave her, his father, your grandfather, Theron Vance, disinherited him, cut him off without a single penny. So yes, for a time they were poor. He was a musician, and when you were born, the pressure was immense. He didn't run off. His father offered him a terrible choice: come back, alone, and his new heir, which was you, would be provided for. Or stay, and Theron would use his power to ruin you both. Daniel, he made a choice. He thought he was saving you. He left, broke his own heart, and planned to build a fortune to come back for you. But he never did, Eleanor whispered, a new, ancient pain welling up. Oh, but he did, Julian said softly. He didn't just build a fortune, Eleanor. He built an empire. Daniel was a genius. He had a brilliant mind for coding and logistics. He moved to California in the 90s, changed his name, and founded a software company, a logistics company, a dozen other things. He lived simply, in a small apartment in Palo Alto. He never remarried. He poured every ounce of his brilliance into his work, all for you. Julian slid a thick portfolio across the desk. Eleanor, your father, Daniel Vance, died with a net worth of, well, after taxes, it's estimated at $947 million. Eleanor's vision tunneled. The room went silent. Mrs. Petroff gripped her hand. And, Julian continued, his voice gentle, you are his sole heir. Eleanor stared at him. She looked at Lily, sleeping peacefully in her arms. She thought of the $10,000 check on the rain-soaked marble. She thought of the food pantry, the cold room, the accusations of infidelity. He left it all. To me? Everything. Vance Holdings, a portfolio of tech stocks, real estate, and 2 highly profitable logistics firms. And this. Julian handed her a small, worn, leather-bound book. His journal. He said it would explain more than he ever could. Eleanor was no longer Eleanor Adler, the victim. She wasn't Ella Vance, the dishwasher. She was Eleanor Vance. She was one of the wealthiest women in the country. She looked up at Julian, the tears in her eyes not of sadness, but of a terrifying, cold, and sudden clarity. "Mr. Hayes," she said, her voice no longer a whisper, "I need you to do something for me. I need you to find me the most aggressive, most ruthless divorce attorney in the city of Chicago." Julian Hayes smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "I don't think you'll need one, Eleanor. You see, I'm a probate lawyer, but my firm's specialty is litigation. And from what I've read, Mr. Adler's lawyer, Silas, is rather sloppy. He took the divorce papers Mrs. Petrov had brought. Abandonment, infidelity, paternity contest. Oh my, this is a gift." "What do you mean?" "I mean, Ms. Vance," Julian said, his kind eyes turning hard. "We are not going to respond to this. We are going to let Mr. Adler think you are still a terrified, broke, single mother. We're going to let him proceed with his engagement. We're going to let him build his new life on his foundation of lies. And then we are going to take a bulldozer to it." "But the divorce, he'll try to get a default judgment. But given the irregularities in his petition, it will be trivial to vacate. No, Eleanor, you are not just going to divorce him. You are going to ruin him." Over the next year, Eleanor vanished. She moved, with Lily and Mrs. Petrov, whom she named Vice President of Domestic Affairs with an astronomical salary, into a secure, unlisted penthouse. She didn't buy flashy cars or designer clothes. She learned. She sat with Julian Hayes, with her father's CFOs, with her new legal team. She learned about finance. She learned about real estate. She learned about power. She read her father's journals, and in them she found a man of profound intellect and a deep, aching love for the daughter he'd never known. She inherited his brilliance, and she honed it with her own survivor's steel. She discovered she was very, very good at this. She had a mind for systems, for finding the weakness in a structure. She wasn't just the owner of Vance Holdings. She was its CEO. She let the divorce proceedings initiated by Peter sit, letting his lawyers file motion after motion into a void, all of which her own team silently and invisibly countered, keeping the case in a state of legal limbo. Peter and his lawyer Silas assumed she was just off the grid and unreachable, a legal ghost. And one day, a year into her new life, a file landed on her desk. It was a potential acquisition, a portfolio of distressed real estate, and a name on the asset sheet made her blood turn to ice. Willow Creek Estates. While Eleanor was being reborn in fire and finance, Peter Adler was ascending to his own personal heaven. The merger of Adler Equity and Sterling Investments was a roaring success. More than a merger, it was an absorption. The Adler name was quietly dropped, and Peter was named COO of the new Sterling Adler Global, a title that came with a corner office overlooking the Chicago River and an 8-figure salary. He and Isabella Sterling were the city's new golden couple. Their engagement party was the event of the season. Their wedding, planned for the following summer, was already being whispered about as a merger of dynasties. Genevieve Adler was in a state of constant, unbearable ecstasy. She had won. She had engineered her son's entire life, cutting out the cancer of his first unfortunate marriage and grafting him onto the Sterling family tree. She was a queen mother, and Isabella, with her perfect pedigree and cold, ambitious heart, was the daughter-in-law she had always deserved. Peter, for his part, rarely thought of Eleanor. When he did, it was with a vague, dismissive annoyance. He'd heard through Silas that she'd disappeared, probably gone back to whatever trailer park she'd crawled out of, he assumed. He'd had the private investigator he'd hired to track her down and serve the papers, report that she'd been spotted, heavily pregnant, washing dishes in a greasy spoon. The report had made him feel a flash of something. Guilt. No. Disgust. It was embarrassing. He was glad he'd cut her loose. He, Peter Adler, couldn't have a child of his associated with that kind of squalor. The paternity contest in the divorce filing had been Genevieve's idea, a scorched earth tactic to ensure that even if the child was his, it would have no legal claim on him. Silas had eventually reported that he'd served her at the diner. But then, nothing. She never responded. She never appeared in court. After months of filings, Silas had managed to get a default judgment. "She's a ghost, Peter," Silas had said, signing the final papers. "She never contested. The divorce is final. She abandoned the case, just like she abandoned the marriage. You are a free man." Peter had felt a profound sense-play of relief. The final thread was cut. He was clean. To celebrate his new life, his promotion, and his engagement, he and Isabella, and Genevieve, who would have her own in-law suite, moved. They didn't just buy a house, they acquired a lifestyle. Willow Creek Estates was the most exclusive, most opulent gated community in the Chicago suburbs. It wasn't just a collection of mansions, it was a curated living experience. Each home was a sprawling, custom-built testament to obscene wealth, set on acres of manicured lawns. There was a golf course designed by a legend, a clubhouse that resembled a French chateau, and a security force that could rival a small country's military. Peter's new home was the crown jewel, a 20,000-square-foot Georgian mansion at the end of a winding drive, with a 10-car garage, an infinity pool, and a view of the private lake. It was, in a word, perfect. There was, however, one small, persistent annoyance. The house, like all houses in Willow Creek, wasn't owned. Not outright. It was part of a complex, 99-year lease and ownership agreement with the development's holding company, Willow Creek Management, LLC. It was a legal quirk designed to keep the community pure. The LLC had to approve all residents, all sales, all everything. It was, in theory, the ultimate in exclusive living. In practice, it was a headache. "The fountain in the motor court is green," Genevieve complained one afternoon, 2 years into their new life. "And the north wing air conditioning sounds like a dying walrus. I've called the management company 3 times. "I'll handle it, Mother," Peter said, annoyed. He was trying to plan the party of all parties, his 40th birthday and his official engagement celebration, all rolled into one. Robert Sterling would be there. The governor would be there. This was his true arrival. He too had noticed issues. The landscaping, once pristine, was looking a bit ragged. The security gates were slow. When he called the management company, he no longer got the crisp, efficient property manager. He got a new man, a Mr. Jones, who sounded bored and vaguely incompetent. "It's a holding company, Peter. What do you expect?" His father-in-law, Robert Sterling, had boomed over lunch. "Place is probably leveraged to the hilt. Bad management. In fact, I've heard rumors the whole LLC is in financial trouble. Some idiot overextended." Peter felt a knot of anxiety. "Trouble? What kind of trouble? We've poured millions into the interiors." Robert Sterling laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "Don't worry about it. It's just a shell company. Someone will buy it out, probably for pennies on the dollar. Might even be me. I've had my eye on that whole portfolio. A distressed asset is a terrible thing to waste." Peter relaxed. Of course, Robert would handle it. Robert handled everything. He turned his attention back to the party. It would be a masquerade ball, tents on the lawn, a full orchestra, valets. It would be the night he, Peter Adler, was finally and irrevocably crowned king. He stood on his massive terrace, overlooking the lake, a glass of 500-a-bottle scotch in his hand. He thought, for a fleeting, inexplicable second, of Eleanor. He pictured her in that greasy diner, covered in grime, a screaming brat on her hip. He laughed out loud. He raised his glass to the sunset. To the future, he said to himself. He had no idea that his past was looking at a spreadsheet with his name on it. Eleanor's new office was the antithesis of Peter's. It was not a monument to ego. It was a command center. Located in a nondescript, brutally secure building in the financial district, the headquarters of Vance Holdings was a hub of quiet, lethal efficiency. Eleanor, now 5 years older, polished, and with an aura of command that was utterly natural, stood before a wall of monitors. Her dark hair was pulled back into a severe but elegant chignon. Her simple, dark blue sheath dress cost more than Peter's tuxedo, but it was designed to be forgotten. She was the only thing in the room that mattered. Julian Hayes, now her general counsel and trusted advisor, stood beside her. "Here it is," Julian said, pointing to a complex flowchart on the main screen. "Willow Creek Management LLC. As you suspected, it's a house of cards." "Talk to me," Eleanor said, her voice calm and low. "The LLC is a subsidiary of a larger holding company, Apex Real Estate Partners. Apex took out massive loans to build Willow Creek and 2 other developments. The problem is," Julian zoomed in on a block of red text, "they were too exclusive. They built for a 0.01% that didn't materialize as quickly as they'd hoped. Their occupancy is only at 60%, and their overhead is astronomical. They are bleeding cash. And the residents? Locked into 99-year leases that are ironclad. They pay their HOA and lease fees to the LLC, but the LLC name is failing to pay its own creditors, namely, the bank that holds the master mortgage on the entire development." Eleanor looked at the name of the bank. Then she looked at another file, one her research team had compiled. "Robert Sterling," she said. It wasn't a question. "Exactly," Julian confirmed. "Sterling Adler Global has been buying up Apex's debt, aggressively, not just from the primary bank, but from their secondary creditors, their landscapers, their security firm. They've been buying it all, under a dozen different shell companies for the last 6 months." "He's not trying to save them," Eleanor murmured, the strategy unfolding in her mind. "He's orchestrating a hostile takeover. He's going to consolidate all the debt, trigger a default, and then, as the primary creditor, seize the entire development in the bankruptcy auction. For pennies on the dollar, as he'd say." "It's a classic Sterling move," Julian said. "Brutal, effective. And he's made one mistake." "He's moving too slowly," Eleanor said, a rare, thin smile touching her lips. "He thinks he's the only shark in the water. He's waiting for the final default, which is scheduled for the end of the quarter. He wants to get it all, but he doesn't own it yet. Apex still does, and Apex is desperate." Eleanor turned to her CFO. "What is our liquid cash position?" The CFO didn't blink. "As of this morning, just over 1.2 billion, Ms. Vance." "Good." She turned back to Julian. "I am not interested in the debt. I am interested in the asset. I want you to go to Apex Real Estate Partners today. You will not offer them pennies. You will offer them a lifeline. You will pay over market value. You will not just buy the Willow Creek LLC. You will buy all of Apex, the entire company. You will pay off their primary bank loan in full before Sterling even knows what's happening. You will make the owner of Apex, a man named George Prentice, so rich, so fast, that he'll sign the papers before his lunch gets cold. Julian raised an eyebrow. Eleanor, that's a premium of maybe $100 million for a failing company. It's not a failing company, Eleanor said, her eyes fixed on the name Peter Adler in the resident directory. It's a distressed asset, and I'm not buying it to make a profit. I'm buying it to make a point. I want this done by tomorrow, and I want it done through a triple-blind shell corp based in Delaware. No one, not Sterling, not Peter, not George Prentice. No one traces this back to Vance Holdings. And Robert Sterling, Julian asked. When he finds out the company he's been strangling has suddenly paid off all its loans and been sold from under him, he will be furious. He'll lose millions in this play. Yes, Eleanor said. He will. That's the other half of the point. The deal was done in 36 hours. George Prentice, the beleaguered owner of Apex, thought he was hallucinating when an offer came in, not only to buy his entire company, but to make him whole on all his debts. He signed so fast the ink smeared. Robert Sterling, when he got the call that the Apex loan had been paid in full by an anonymous third party, threw a crystal decanter across his office. His sure thing had just cost him $50 million in bad debt he'd acquired. He had no asset, and he had an army of angry subcontractors he now had to pay. Back at Willow Creek Estates, the changes were subtle, then sudden. Peter's complaints, which had been ignored for weeks, were suddenly addressed. A new, silent, unnervingly efficient landscaping team arrived and restored the grounds to pristine perfection. The green fountain was scrubbed. The air conditioning in Genevieve's wing was replaced with a new, silent system. And then the other changes began. The residents received a new community guidelines packet from the new management of Willow Creek LLC. All exterior modifications, including temporary structures, tents, etc., must be submitted for approval 30 days in advance. Guest lists for any gathering over 20 people must be provided to management 72 hours in advance for security screening. Noise curfews will be strictly enforced at 10 p.m. This is outrageous, Genevieve shrieked, rattling the thick, cream-colored paper. A curfew? For us? And Peter, your party. The tent is a temporary structure. It's fine, Mother, Peter snapped, though he was worried. He'd sent the plans for his masquerade ball to the management office. The response he got back was chillingly polite. Dear Mr. Adler, we have received your event request. Please note that the new landscaping on the east lawn, which your tent would damage, is valued at over $250,000. Your security deposit on file is insufficient. We will require an additional bond of $500,000 to be placed in escrow to cover potential damages. Additionally, your proposed guest list of 300 exceeds community guidelines. A security and parking surcharge of $75,000 will be applied. Finally, your orchestra's sound check must be complete by 4:01 p.m. and all music must cease by 10:00 p.m. No exceptions. We look forward to your compliance. Sincerely, the Office of the Landlord. 500,000. Peter was apoplectic. They're shaking me down. This is extortion. Call Robert, Genevieve demanded. Peter did. Robert Sterling was still furious about the Apex deal. Don't bother me with this, Peter. I'm trying to find out who this new mystery owner is. Some Some shadow company bought the whole portfolio. Just pay the fee. We can't look weak. Not now. We'll deal with this new landlord after your party. Grumbling, Peter wrote the check. He would not be intimidated. He would have this party. It was too important. It was the night that would cement his and the Sterlings' absolute dominance in this city. The night of the party arrived. It was a perfect, clear night. The massive white tent looked spectacular. The valets were lined up. The orchestra was playing softly. Peter, dressed as a Venetian king, and Isabella, a glittering ice queen, stood at the top of their grand staircase, ready to receive their guests. At 7 p.m. the first cars arrived. At 7:05 p.m. the front gates of Willow Creek Estates jammed. At 7:10 p.m. the sprinklers on the front lawn, and only the front lawn where the valets were stationed, burst to life, dousing the valets and the first row of arriving cars. At 7:15 p.m. the power to the entire mansion, including the tent, shut off. The orchestra went silent. The lights went out. The only sound was the hissing of the sprinklers and the angry horns of a dozen limousines stuck outside the gate. "What is going on?" Peter roared into the darkness. A single beam of light appeared at the end of his driveway. A car. A modest black sedan. It hadn't come from the gate. It had come from the service road. The car pulled up to the front door. The engine cut. The back door opened. A woman stepped out. She was not in costume. She was in a simple, dark business dress. She was flanked by two large, imposing men in suits and a third, older gentleman holding a briefcase. She walked calmly past the sputtering, soaked valets, up the steps, and into the grand, dark foyer, which was now lit only by the panicked glows of 100 cell phones. Peter, his face purple with rage under his ridiculous gold mask, stormed toward her. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded. "My party is ruined. I'll have you arrested. Security. Essig." The woman stopped in front of him. The older man with the briefcase shined a small, bright flashlight, illuminating her face. Peter's voice died in his throat. Genevieve gasped, dropping her champagne glass. Isabella Sterling looked confused. "Peter, darling, who is this?" Peter couldn't speak. He was looking at a ghost. But it wasn't the gaunt, terrified girl he'd thrown out 5 years ago. This woman was powerful. Her eyes were not filled with tears. They were filled with ice. "Eleanor," he choked out. "Hello, Peter," Eleanor Vance said, her voice clear and strong, echoing in the silent, cavernous hall. "Genevieve, you're looking well." "What? What are you doing here?" Peter sputtered. "How did you get in? This is private property." "It is," Eleanor agreed, "which is why I'm here. We've been receiving reports of disturbances, a power outage, a malfunctioning sprinkler system. As the new owner, I had to come and inspect the property myself." A deafening silence fell over the foyer. Even the guests stopped whispering. "Owner?" Isabella said, laughing a brittle, nervous laugh. "What is she talking about, Peter? Is this some street person?" I... Peter was staring at Julian Hayes, who was now opening his briefcase. "Mr. Adler," Julian Hayes said, his voice professorial and sharp. "My client, Miss Eleanor Vance, is the sole proprietor of Vance Holdings, which is the parent company of the Delaware Corporation, that, as of 36 hours ago, purchased Apex Real Estate Partners, the holding company of Willow Creek Management, LLC. He handed a sheaf of papers to Peter. Eleanor stepped closer, her voice dropping so only Peter, Genevieve, and Isabella could hear her. "You called my baby baggage. You said I was an embarrassment. You live in a beautiful home, Peter. Truly. The grounds are lovely. But you are just a tenant." She looked around the dark room, at the ruined party, at the stunned, glittering guests. "I am the landlord," Eleanor said, her voice ringing out. "And I'm afraid you're in violation of your lease. The noise, the unapproved structures, it's all a bit much." She looked at Isabella. "Isabella Sterling, a pleasure. I have all the files on your father's creative attempts to acquire this property. Fraud, market manipulation, it's all very, very interesting. I'm sure the SEC will think so too." Isabella's face went white. She looked at Peter, her eyes suddenly filled with dawning horror and contempt. Eleanor turned back to Peter. "Oh, and the power. It's not coming back on, not tonight. And the sprinklers? They're on well, let's just say it's a new system. It's very thorough." She gave him a cold, empty smile. "Enjoy your party, Peter. Get your things. My security team will be here at 9 a.m. tomorrow to escort you, your mother, and your fiancé off my property." She turned, her work done. She walked out of the foyer, got back in her car, and drove away, not even looking back at the smoking crater she had left of his life. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. As Eleanor's sedan disappeared, the party disintegrated. The guests, the governor, the CEOs, the city's elite, fled the darkness like rats, scrambling for their cars, desperate to escape the blast radius. In the cavernous, pitch-black foyer, only Peter, Genevieve, and Isabella remained, lit by the accusing beams of their cell phones. "Peter!" Isabella's voice was a shard of ice. "Who was that? It's complicated," Peter stammered, ripping the mask from his face. She's my ex-wife." "Your ex-wife?" Isabella shrieked. "The one you told me was a checkout girl who ran off. The unstable one. She looked like she just bought the world." "She's nobody," Genevieve hissed. "This is a trick. Robert will handle this." "Oh, I don't think Daddy's handling anything," Isabella snapped. "Did you hear what she said? SEC, fraud. My father just lost millions on this property, and now his future son-in-law's psycho ex-wife is threatening to send him to prison. Our engagement, our marriage, it's a business deal. And you, Peter, you just became the single worst deal of my father's career." She stormed out into the night, leaving Peter and Genevieve alone in the dark. By 9 a.m. the next morning, the story was everywhere. Socialite's party from hell, ousted wife returns as mystery landlord. Eleanor Vance, the multi-billionaire head of Vance Holdings, was suddenly the most talked-about woman in America. Peter's phone was exploding. His first call was from Robert Sterling. It was not a conversation. It was a 5-minute tirade of screaming that ended with a simple, "You're fired. Clean out your desk." The Sterling-Adler Global Alliance was over. His career was over. Then, at 9 a.m. on the dot, Eleanor's security team arrived. They were not valets. They were ex-military professionals in black suits. "Mr. Adler, Mrs. Adler," the team leader said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Per the terms of your lease agreement, which you are in breach of, you have 60 minutes to vacate the premises with your personal effects." "This is my home," Peter roared. "This is the property of Miss Vance," the man corrected. "And you are trespassing. 60 minutes." The humiliation was absolute. Peter and Genevieve were forced to scramble, throwing clothes and jewelry into suitcases. They were escorted, like common criminals, past the new security at the front gate and left on the curb. They checked into a suite at the Four Seasons, a pathetic attempt to cling to their former status. "We'll sue her," Genevieve kept repeating, her hands shaking. "Silas will handle it." "Silas isn't answering my calls, Mother," Peter yelled. He was a pariah. And then the final, crushing blow. A courier arrived at the hotel, a new envelope, thick, cream-coloured, from Hayes, Cromwell and Finch. It wasn't a lawsuit, it was a motion to vacate judgment. Peter's hands shook as he read the legal filing. It was a petition from Eleanor Vance's legal team to reopen their divorce. "What is this?" Genevieve demanded, snatching it from him. Silas said the divorce was final. She read the attached affidavit. It was from one of the nation's top forensic handwriting experts, attesting with 100% certainty that the signature on the original acceptance of service document, the one that supposedly proved Eleanor had received the papers, was a forgery. The report noted, with chilling detail, that the forgery bore all the hallmarks of Genevieve Adler's known handwriting. "You," Peter whispered, turning to his mother. "What did you do?" I... Genevieve's face was a mottled, papery white. "She disappeared. She wouldn't sign. She was in the way. Silas said we just needed proof. So I fixed it." "You fixed it?" Peter sank into a chair. "You forged a federal document. You committed perjury." The motion wasn't just to reopen the divorce. It was to have the entire original filing struck as fraudulent. "What does this mean?" Genevieve whispered, her arrogance finally, truly gone. "It means," Peter said, his voice a dead monotone, "that the divorce was never valid. It means, for the last 5 years, I've been a bigamist. It means my engagement to Isabella was a sham. It means I'm still married." He looked at his mother, his eyes hollow. "It means," he said, "that Eleanor is still my wife." The hotel room phone rang. Peter picked it up. "Mr. Adler," the smooth, kind voice of Julian Hayes said, "Miss Vance is prepared to discuss the terms of your new divorce, or we can proceed with the criminal and civil charges for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. I'll let you decide. We'll be sending a car for you." The car that arrived for Peter was not a limousine. It was the same modest sedan Eleanor had used. It drove him to a quiet park by the lagoon. He saw her standing by the water, watching a 5-year-old girl in a bright yellow dress chase a duck. The girl was laughing, a pure, joyous sound. She had his eyes. Eleanor turned as he approached. "Lily," she called, her voice soft. "Mommy needs to talk to this man. Can you go play with Auntie Elena?" A smiling Mrs. Petrov waved from a nearby bench, and Lily ran to her. She's beautiful, Eleanor," Peter whispered. "Her name is Lily Vance," Eleanor said, her voice flat and cold. "She is not your daughter. You waived that right when you contested her paternity. You declared in a sworn legal document that she was not yours. And I am inclined to agree. She has none of your weakness." "Eleanor, I'm ruined," he said, the words spilling out. "My job, Isabella, the house, it's all gone." "You think this was about the house?" Eleanor almost laughed. "I sold Willow Creek Estates this morning to a hotel consortium, made a tidy 20% profit. I don't want that house, Peter. This wasn't revenge. This was pest control. You were a loose end. The divorce you filed was a lie, and I cannot build a future for my daughter on a foundation that still has your name attached to it." Julian Hayes approached, holding a single, slim document. "This," Eleanor said, "is our real divorce. A simple, no-fault dissolution." Peter's eyes narrowed. "And if I don't sign? If I'm still your husband, that makes me entitled." Eleanor's smile was the coldest thing he had ever seen. "If you don't sign, Peter, then Julian will walk straight from this park to the district attorney's office with a mountain of evidence for your and your mother's role in forgery, perjury, and wire fraud. They are felonies, Peter. You'll be in prison for 10 years. Your mother, maybe 5. She gestured to the pen Julian was holding. Or, you sign. You disappear. You take your mother, and you will be free. You, who had everything, get your freedom. I, who had nothing, get mine. Peter looked at the paper. He saw the ironclad bars of a prison cell. His hand shaking, he took the pen and signed his name. It's done, he whispered. Yes, Eleanor said. She took the paper, handed it to Julian without a glance, and turned her back on him. She walked across the grass, scooped up her laughing daughter, and hugged her. Together, her new family walked to their car and drove away. Peter Adler was left alone in the park. He was no one. He was free. Eleanor Vance moved her headquarters to New York. She never looked back. She used her inheritance to establish the Lily and Daniel Vance Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to providing legal aid and housing for mothers and children in need. She was, finally, free too. And just like that, with a single signature, Peter Adler was erased. He learned the hard way that the person you step on when you're climbing the ladder might be the one who owns the entire building. Eleanor's story isn't just about getting rich. It's about reclaiming her power, her name, and her child's future. She didn't just want revenge, she wanted justice, and she got it. What do you think about Eleanor's final move? Was it pure justice, or the coldest revenge? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. This story is a powerful reminder that your past does not define your future, and underestimating someone is the most dangerous mistake you can make. If you were moved by this story, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more incredible true-life dramas. Don't forget to ring that bell so you never miss an update.